The kindly old man handed over $10 to the homeless man. He thought he would receive a thank you. Unexpectedly, the homeless man was not only ungrateful, but also set his sights on the $100 bills in the old man's wallet. Seeing the old man reluctant to give, the homeless man directly lunged to snatch, but due to malnutrition, he was pushed to the ground. The medicine bottle on the old man also fell out. The homeless man quickly stood up next to the medicine bottle.
Need that?
The old man was a little flustered.
Please don't do anything. That's my medication.
However, the homeless man ignored his pleading, stepped forward and stomped on the medicine bottle, then quickly turned around and ran away. Without the medicine, the old man could die at any time. To prevent accidents on the road, he could only bend over and pick up the powder little by little, then he got back on the train to continue his journey. The old man was going to see his 4 children living in different cities. It was this journey that made him truly understand what it means to be good parents. The reason why he took the road alone with his illness, the story needs to start a few days ago. That day, Frank got up early on purpose. Not only did he carefully clean every corner of the room, even the flowers and plants at home were all taken care of, even the inflatable swimming pool that hasn't been used for a long time was taken out. Then he happily went to the supermarket. He, who has always been frugal, not only chose the top-grade steak without a discount, he also bought the most expensive red wine in the entire supermarket, and even spent a lot of money to buy a high-end oven. Working until late at night, he was still enthusiastically reading the manual to learn how to use the oven. The reason why Frank was so abnormal, because this weekend his 4 children who are wandering outside are coming back. Since his wife died 8 months ago, the 4 children never came back home. So Frank planned to have a good gathering with them. However, while he was tirelessly busy, his eldest son called, saying that he couldn't come back due to an emergency. Frank didn't say anything, he just said that it was a pity, you might miss a delicious meal. Just as he hung up the phone, his eldest daughter and younger daughter also called. The eldest daughter said that she couldn't leave because her child was ill, and the younger daughter said that she couldn't come back because of a sudden performance. It seems that their lives are always full of countless urgent matters that need to be resolved, and each of them is more important than coming home to visit their old father. Frank said it was okay, but he was a little sad. He was flipping through the expensive steak in his hand alone. The originally planned lively dinner turned into his alone in the blink of an eye. During his evening wash in the bathroom, he had a crazy idea. Since you are all so busy and can't come back to see me, then I will take the initiative to see you and give you a surprise. Because the 4 children live in 4 different cities, Frank, who is older, is not in good health. He found a doctor, hoping to get some medicine for the road. However, he was strongly opposed by the doctor. You can't take a plane with your body, and it would be too exhausting to take a bus or train. This is very likely to cause you an emergency on the road. However, Frank's mind was set at this time. After the doctor gave him enough medicine, Frank returned home and took out the suitcase. First, he wrote a letter to each of the 4 children. He decided to give them the letter personally. After repeatedly confirming that the clothes, keys, and medicines were all brought, he set off with a staggering pace. When buying the tickets, he excitedly said that he was going to see his son who became a painter. On the train, looking at the power line parallel to the train outside, Frank proudly introduced his profession. Before I retired, I was a worker who painted protective coating on wires. During my career, the total length of the wires I painted exceeded 300,000 meters. It is my hard work that has earned my 4 children's outstanding achievements. Saying this, he couldn't help but show off his photos to others. These are my 4 children. The eldest son is a music conductor, the younger son is a painter, the elder daughter is a senior executive of the company, and the younger daughter is a dancer. During the talk, Frank's face could hardly hide his pride. Even when waiting for the train on the platform, he couldn't help talking about his excellent children. It turns out that all the parents in the world are the same, no matter where they go. They can't leave their children out of their mouths. Soon, Frank came to the first stop, New York, where his younger son, David, lived. Unfortunately, the main door of the building was not open. Considering that his younger son might be out, Frank quietly sat on the staircase in front of the door and waited. Unexpectedly, until late at night, David did not come back. Frank decided to find a place to stay for one night and come back tomorrow. When he passed a gallery, he saw David's signature painting in the window. Looking at his son's exquisite painting, Frank's thoughts returned to David's childhood. At that time, David's dream was to become a painter. He can freely draw his favorite paintings on the wall. But Frank told him that a painter's paintings can only be painted on the wall, and dogs would occasionally pee on it. Be a painter, because only painters can change people's lives. At that time, little David agreed. When he grew up, he really didn't disappoint his father. Through unremitting efforts, he became an excellent painter. The next morning, Frank came to David's home again, knocking on the door for a long time. No one opened. He decided to go to his elder daughter's house first, so he pushed a letter into the gap in the door from the ground. Heavy clouds floated in the low sky, scattered corn stalks stood on the dry grassland. I don't know how his eldest daughter, who is a senior executive of a company, is doing. Without much thought, Frank boarded the bus to his eldest daughter's home. When he was hungry, he found a fast food restaurant to eat something. When he was tired, he found a cheaper motel. When he was tired, he would watch TV and laugh by himself. The sun pierced through the clouds, casting golden rays of light. The drooping power lines seemed to be constantly throbbing strings. After the bus quickly drove under the white clouds, Frank arrived in front of his eldest daughter's detached villa. In his impression, his eldest daughter married a handsome and rich man, and gave birth to a smart and clever little son. After ringing the doorbell nervously, the grandson who came to open the door looked surprised. The grandson just hugged him briefly, then quickly ran back to the room to play games. Frank was also confused. Didn't his daughter say on the phone that his grandson was sick? How quickly he is back to his jumpy self. Seeing his elder daughter on the phone, Frank whistled at her like when she was a child. No matter how old the children grow, they are always children in the eyes of their parents. The eldest daughter was also shocked to see her father, and then she became panic-stricken. She seemed to be hiding something from Frank. While her father was playing golf with her son, her eldest daughter anxiously made a phone call in her room. It was at this time that Frank found out that his grandson's grades were not very good. It wasn't until dinner that her son-in-law hurried back from outside. In front of her father, the two fell in love, but there was an incident on the dinner table. The grandson was very resistant to his son-in-law, as if there was a deep hatred between the two. In order to avoid embarrassment, the eldest daughter hurriedly changed the subject. When Frank proposed staying here for a few days, his eldest daughter immediately said it was inconvenient. "My husband is going on a business trip next, I have to work overtime, even your little grandson, I just reported him to a tutoring class. This is clearly trying to drive him away directly." Frank said that it didn't matter, "Seeing the three of you makes me very content." When leaving, Frank wanted to take a souvenir photo with them, but the grandson would rather stand aside than get close to his father. In the end, they all managed to squeeze out a slight smile. At the time of farewell at the station, Frank first took out the letter written to his eldest daughter, then he asked his eldest daughter the question in his heart.
You happy?
The eldest daughter was asked with a stunned expression, and then she answered a bit incoherently.
Yeah, of course I am.
Looking at the flustered expression of his eldest daughter, the father did not say anything, because he understood. After hugging his eldest daughter, he continued to travel to the next station, still taking the bus during the day and staying in a motel at night. The next morning he took the train and kept moving forward. Accompanied by the constantly changing scenery outside the window, Frank soon arrived in the city where his elder son lived. Seeing posters of his eldest son's performances all over the city, Frank couldn't help but take a picture with the posters on the main street. When he arrived at the Grand Theater, the entire orchestra was rehearsing nervously, but the conductor was not his eldest son. His eldest son was just an insignificant drummer behind. Seeing his father come over, the elder son hurriedly put down his work and ran over. Frank has always thought that his eldest son has a high musical talent. In his impression, his eldest son is a conductor. Then he asked the question in his heart, "Didn't you say you are a conductor? How did you become a drummer now? As a highly educated musician, you should not do this. If possible, I hope you can try again to be a conductor." However, the elder son said, "I never said I was a conductor. I really like this drumming job and feel it is quite good. The tasks are few. The money is much, there is no responsibility, and I can travel everywhere. It is simply made for me." It turns out there is a kind of dissatisfaction in the world called parents think you are unhappy. There is a kind of disappointment in the world. It is you think your parents are disappointed with you. Actually, there are not so many successful people in the world. If you are successful, your parents naturally feel proud, but in fact, if you have no achievements, as long as you live healthily and happily, parents will also be happy for you. When Frank proposed to stay for 2 days to watch his son's performance, the older son apologized, "I'm leaving for a European tour this afternoon, and it won't be a day or two to come back." Frank hopes the elder son can find a girlfriend and get married as soon as possible. A lot of words made the oldest son quite depressed. Frank wanted to smoke a cigarette to relax, but because of his father's reprimands about the harmful effects of smoking, the situation became very awkward. After a few dry chats, Frank started praising his eldest son. "Actually, you play the drums pretty well." Seeing that he finally got his father's approval, the elder son happily introduced his father to his colleagues. When leaving, Frank again asked the question he had asked his eldest daughter.
And you're happy?
Happy, yeah. I get paid to bang a big loud drum all day. Of course I'm happy.
Frank and his elder son hugged goodbye. The elder son said guiltily, "I'm sorry I couldn't have you stay for a few days." When Frank turned around, his son seemed to have returned to the childishness of his youth. Frank put the letter on his son's big drum. Although he didn't go to the station to send his father off in person, the elder son followed his father silently all the time. He didn't turn around and leave until he saw his father buy a ticket and enter the station, and then he reported to his sister. They seemed to be always hiding something from their father. Frank called David, who he could not meet. It is at this point that we discover that David's room has long been vacated. When passing through a culvert, Frank saw a homeless man curled up on the ground, coughing continuously. Perhaps seeing the homeless man was the same age as his own child, he kindly asked if he needed help, then generously took out $10 from his wallet for him to buy something to eat. Then the scene at the beginning happened. Not only was the homeless man not grateful, but he also tried to snatch Frank's wallet. He even directly crushed his life-saving medicine. Feeling very upset, Frank came to a phone booth and dialed the home phone. Although his wife has been dead for more than half a year, he never changed the voicemail with his wife's message at home. When he heard his wife's familiar voice, the flustered Frank gradually calmed down. The train traveled all night, until almost noon the next day. Frank finally arrived in Las Vegas. As soon as he got out of the station, his youngest daughter was already waiting there. To show her father that she was doing well, the younger daughter specially rented a limousine. The inside of the car looked comfortable and spacious. The younger daughter brought Frank to her mansion. Not only did she arrange a huge bedroom for him, she also booked a big meal in the Sky Revolving restaurant. Before they could set off, the woman next door suddenly brought over a child. She said she had something urgent to do, and she hoped her younger daughter could take care of him. Unexpectedly, this female neighbor went out for an entire day. Seeing that they couldn't eat the meal, Frank played with the child on the sofa. Somehow, he always felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Frank poured out all the medicine residue in his pocket. After picking out the clothing fibers inside, he swallowed it all. Frank accidentally heard a voicemail. Only then did he know that this mansion was rented by his younger daughter with money. In order not to trouble his daughter, Frank said his medicine was gone and planned to go home the next day. His younger daughter didn't try too hard to retain him. At dinner, the younger daughter turned back into the greedy little girl. When they talked about their mother, Frank asked a question that had been in his heart for many years. Why do you always like talking to your mother, but you never share anything with me? His younger daughter answered, because mother is a great listener, but you always teach us what to do, and your demands on us are too strict. The father explained that I just wanted to be a good father. I hope you can all live a good life. In order to rush home for medication, this time the father plans to fly back. Before parting, he handed the last letter to his younger daughter. This time, Frank didn't ask the question, "Are you happy?" because he knew that even if he asked, the younger daughter would not tell the truth. Looking at her father's stooped back, the younger daughter's heart was mixed. She is actually not a dancer at all, but a simple waitress in a restaurant. On the plane, while looking at the thunder and lightning outside the window, Frank suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. He wanted to ease it with the water in the bathroom, but his condition got worse. When the flight attendant found out about him, his consciousness had started to blur. In a daze, he and his 4 children sat in the backyard. He questioned his 4 children, "Why are you all deceiving me?" It turns out that although they never said anything, Frank already saw through everything. He asked his eldest daughter, "Have you already divorced your husband?" The eldest daughter explained, "My husband had a new love 3 months ago, so that's why our son hated him so much." He asked his elder son, "There are posters for performances all over your city, you can't possibly go on a tour of Europe." The elder son explained, "There are many things we didn't tell you, but that doesn't mean we want to hurt you." He asked his younger daughter, "Is that child yours? Why did you hide it from me?" The younger daughter explained, "I did want to tell you, but since mom suddenly got sick and I didn't want to disappoint you, I didn't tell you." Finally, Frank looked at David, who he cared about the most. "Where can I see you?" However, David didn't say anything, just smirked. This made Frank very angry. At this moment, there was a loud noise in the sky, and raindrops the size of beans fell from the sky. The children quickly packed up and ran back to the room. Watching the children leave, Frank looked up at the night sky. He couldn't figure out why things had turned out this way. All these years, all the children have been lying to him. When Frank woke up again, he was already lying in a hospital bed. By then, all the children had come, but David's figure was missing. Frank suddenly had an ominous premonition. He asked the 3 children, "Is there something you are hiding from me? Is there any trouble with David? I really want to know where he is now. When can I see him again?" Facing the father's constant questioning, the faces of the few people were instantly filled with sadness.
David died, Dad.
It turns out that David has been unhappy all these years. Ever since his mother died, his condition got even worse, unable to extricate himself from the sadness all day. Eventually, he died in Mexico due to a drug overdose. It turned out that the brothers and sisters were not allowing him to stay overnight because they were handling this matter nervously behind the scenes. Although he was prepared in advance, but faced with this heavy news, Frank was still unable to accept it for a while.
No, not my son. That's not my son.
Frank cried with sadness and covered his face. The pine trees were constantly swaying in the biting cold wind. The flag was constantly struggling in the pouring mist. In his dream, Frank thought of his conversation with David again. "You will be a painter when you grow up, not a painter. Painters can only be on the wall, and dogs also occasionally pee on them." At the same time, David from his childhood also came to the bed.
Sorry about how everything's worked out, Dad.
It's not your fault.
David said, "I have been thinking about what job I will do when I grow up. It could be a painter, a house painter, or just an ordinary job. This time, Frank said, "No matter what you do, I will be proud of you." As David was about to leave, Frank said,
David, I'm sorry.
The door was turned into David, who had already grown up.
It's not your fault, Dad.
When Frank woke up from his dream, there was nothing in front of him, only the empty corridor was left, and Frank's continuous call to David. Frank regretted his severity to David, but everything is too late. There is no book in the world that teaches people how to be parents. He has tried his best to treat the children, but he didn't expect such an ending. He was moved by his selfless dedication, wanting to make every child stand out, but forgetting to ask what the children really want. After some time, Frank recovered and was discharged from the hospital. He returned to his empty home. The letter he sent to David was returned. In the letter, he invited the children to come home for Christmas. It also includes a photo, which is a photo of the children and their mother on Christmas when they were young. But all this, David can no longer see. Frank came to his wife's grave and murmured to the tombstone, "It was a long journey. If you ask me what I learned from this journey, I really can't tell. But I know that if you can start all over again, I won't be so strict with the children. As long as they can live happily, I am satisfied. I should have been a good listener before." Frank choked up and reported his recent situation to his wife. "The children all promised me to come home for Christmas this year. I hope that David and you can also have a happy Christmas." A few days later, Frank returned to New York. He wanted to buy that painting originally hanging in the window. Unfortunately, that painting has already been bought. Frank left the store in disappointment, but the shop assistant followed him out immediately. It turns out she suddenly realized that Frank is David's father. The shop assistant said, "David often told me in the past, without you, he could never become an artist." Then, the shop assistant took Frank to the warehouse. Here is stored a painting that David has not yet completed. The shop assistant said that David never cared about what was popular. His paintings always have a unique style. When he saw David's unfinished painting, Frank's eyes suddenly wet. It turns out that the painting is the career he has worked hard for a lifetime. This is the most secretive love that David expressed to him. He knew how much Frank appreciated everything the father had done for them. When the golden sunlight mixed with the mist covered the mountain top, when the quiet white snow covered the earth, Frank happily came to the supermarket again. Once again, he bought the top steaks and red wine, and a beautiful Christmas tree. They decorated the house together and busied themselves in the kitchen. Everyone worked together nervously and orderly for dinner. At dinner, seeing the happy family in front of him, Frank suddenly had a lot of feelings. Although he has always hoped that his children are all excellent, it now seems that as long as they are happy, sometimes there is no need to ask so much of the children. At this moment, he just wanted to say a word to his deceased wife.
Everybody's fine.
Everybody's Fine is a family drama film released in 2009, directed by Kirk Jones and starring Robert De Niro. Half a year after his wife's death, because the children didn't have time to come back to see him, so Frank plans to hit the road alone to see them despite being sick. He originally wanted to give them a surprise, but instead, this trip made him feel a mix of emotions. The children he had high hopes for all have their own troubles and are not satisfactory. However, they usually only share good news and not bad, and try to cover themselves up with beautiful lies. A writer once said, "The so-called father-daughter, mother-son course, it simply means that your connection with her is to constantly see her figure receding in this life. When we were young, we were cute and rebellious. We would follow our mother, talking non-stop about everything that happened at school, who bullied us, who we became good friends with, what interesting things happened today and what unhappy things happened. But the secrets of adolescence are never mentioned to parents. Diaries are hidden in places family members will never find. As we grow up, we become indifferent and sensible. We no longer live with our parents and have our own lives. Later on, we have our own families. We are busy, too busy to even make a phone call to our parents. In the face of parents' concern, we always share good news and not bad. Even if life is not good, we gulp down the hardship and never let our parents worry too much. As a parent, how many lies have you told your children? As a child, how many lies have you told your parents? The relationship between parents and children is a topic we study throughout our lives. Frank hopes that his children will stand out and build a great career when they grow up. The children set out with these heavy expectations. Maybe this is not what they want, but it is the expectation of their parents. Out of respect and love for their parents, they do not want to going against their parents' wishes. However, society is cruel, and not everyone can be successful. Although they have not succeeded, they have to pretend to be very successful in front of their parents. They are afraid that their parents will expose their lies, so they can only keep a distance from their parents. The experiences of the three children are indeed sigh-worthy, but David's ending is even more heartbreaking. In the end, although Frank woke up, it was already too late to remedy. In fact, most parents should understand that only a few people in the world can stand at the top of the pyramid. Accepting that your child is a happy ordinary person is not that difficult.